Welcome to this presentation on Fertilizer and Irrigation Management in the AgriWiz program. This is Barbie from the Technical Support Team, and I am going to clarify some of the key concepts behind the system. The topics I'm going to be discussing are shown on your screen. Centralized management of fertilizer programs and irrigation. Flexibility with regard to fertilizer application and irrigation types. The concept of fertilizer mixes, alternative application methods, alternative fertilizers, the new idea of master elements, concentrate tanks, incompatibility warnings, calculation methods for tank mix fertilizers, and injection correction factors. I know that some of these topics may not be relevant to you, but I hope they will be of use to you in future planning for your farm. You can manage all your fertilizer selections and application rates for any field or season in a particular farm from one central location in the program. In the previous version, fertilizers, tank mixes, and irrigation were all dealt with separately. In the upgraded program, you can easily navigate from left to right on this screen to create or edit fertilizer mixes, link those mixes to seasons and create fertilizer programs, view your current fertilizer programs, initiate irrigation or fertilizer schedules by setting the EAW and then calculating the schedule, which can be exported as an Excel spreadsheet or directly to your controllers if that applies. The AgriWiz program is flexible and customizable. You can use any combination of fertilizer application methods in the same fertilizer mix. Your options are shown in the first column on the right. You have 4 different options for calculating tank-applied fertilizers to fields linked to the same mix. You can manage all the farm's fertilizer from one central point. This includes custom valve adjustment of injector rates, fertilizer selection, and tank-based injector calculation methods, including the option to adjust rates for every field. And you have the ability to make changes during the season to your fertilizer types and application methods without losing any of the information regarding to previous applications. In addition, you have 6 different choices of precision of irrigation, and those are illustrated on the far right. The concept of fertilizer mixes is an important innovation in the AgriWiz upgrade. It is designed so that nutrition can be given to your crops when it is needed, where it is needed, and how you want to apply it. You have the options to use 1 or more fertilizer application types in one mix, 1 or more fertilizer types, and different application frequencies. The program will give you fertilizer recommendations based on the chosen application type. You can make adjustments or changes during the season, and any fertilizers already applied will be taken into account in future calculations for recommendations. Making changes to a fertilizer mix for one field is automatically carried through to all fields in the same mix. You can create and use different fertilizer mixes at different times in the season. For instance, if you want a winter mix and a summer mix. And we are introducing the new idea of master elements. The following 2 slides apply to choices that you might make when creating your fertilizer mix. When using the same fertilizer mix to supply fertilizer via the irrigation system, this can result in some fields receiving too little of specific elements. In these situations, the selection of alternative fertilizers and application methods can be used to make up the deficit for each field. If an element is not supplied via the irrigation system, then the alternative fertilizer and application methods can be used to specifically calculate the quantity of fertilizer required for each field. Application methods can be different for each particular element. For example, macro elements can be applied by fertigation, micro elements by foliar application, and calcium by broad-based application of gypsum. Following on from the previous slide, if a tank mix cannot be used to supply the total requirements of a specific element, you can specify which fertilizer you want to use to apply the balance. The system will only supply you with a list of fertilizers suitable for application by the alternative application method that you have selected. The concept of master elements is important but can be tricky to understand. This concept can be applied if you are using a multi-fertilizer, which supplies more than one element, and you do not want to use a single element fertilizer to make up the remaining quantity of element that your multi cannot give due to its element ratio. By designating a multi-element fertilizer a master element, the requirement for a single element fertilizer is dropped, and the correct quantity of the master element will be given even if this results in an oversupply of some of the other elements provided by the designated fertilizer. An example of this would be using calcium nitrate as your calcium source. By designating calcium as your master element, you may get an oversupply of nitrogen. It is important to note that if you select a tank-applied fertilizer, the system will always try and use this before going over to the alternative fertilizers. For tank fertilizers, injection rates will be adjusted so that this element is given at the correct quantity regardless of the other elemental requirements. This is particularly useful when doing precision fertigation and a tank has to contain more than one element. The microelement tank is a good example of this, as it normally contains 3 to 5 elements, often in multi-fertilizers. You can decide which is the most important, and the injection rates will be adjusted to accommodate this. This permits you to use precision fertigation without having to have 11 single element tanks. Always remember, there is significant potential to oversupply some elements. At the request of some of our farmers, we have introduced concentrate tanks. This is one that contains the minimum amount of water needed to dissolve the required amount of fertilizer. This means that a tank will often not be filled to its holding capacity. The advantage of concentrate tanks is that the same mix can be used across multiple fertigation systems if they only contain one fertilizer. This methodology also reduces the potential of injector rates deviating beyond the limits of the injector pumps. Please note, concentrates carry an increased risk of precipitation, and refer to the support document on fertilizer solubility and incompatibility for further information. Some important points to remember when creating tank mixes. Certain chemical compounds, fertilizers, are incompatible with each other and will cause precipitation if combined in solution. This tendency to precipitate is increased at higher concentrations, for example in concentrate tanks, and with decreases in ambient temperature. The AgriWiz program will raise the alert with a warning triangle if fertilizer combinations have a known incompatibility. However, the responsibility remains with the user to perform a jar test for precipitation if using a new mix in a tank or using fertilizers from a new supplier. Please see the support files on fertilizer solubilities and incompatibilities for further information. Another example of how the AgriWiz program can be customized for your farm is the use of different calculation methods for tank-applied fertilizers. If you have a single injection valve system, that is, per tank and not per field, You can select the compromise calculation method for each element. For example, you may have a block with young trees that have a high nitrogen requirement and another block with old trees that must have low nitrogen. You can then select the minimum calculation method for nitrogen so as not to affect the fruit quality. The balance of the nitrogen required by the young trees would then be applied using non-tank applied fertilizers. The calculation methods are best fit, which is the default setting, that takes into account the proportional use of the element. For example, nitrogen requirements for a large field are given more weight than those for a small field. Minimum, which is the lowest required rate across the fields, average for all the linked fields, and maximum, the highest required rate. Another adjustment you can make yourself is the injection correction factor. This value allows you to increase or decrease the injection rate against the recommended injection rate. This is generally used when there has been a great deal of rain and you need to get a lot of fertilizer into the ground with a minimum amount of water. The default value is 100%. Note, there are associated risks with applying high concentrations of fertilizer to plants. In particular, the potential to burn the roots or even kill the crop. Thank you for watching this presentation, which I hope you have found useful. Further information can always be found in the support files in the top right-hand corner of the program under the support icon. This is Barbie from the AgriWiz Technical Support Team.